Well, to talk more about the rising power of the BRICS, Andrew Gavin Marshall, project manager at the peoplesbookproject.com, joins us now. Welcome to the show, Andrew. So tell us about the significance of this summit.
Well, creating alternatives like an alternative to the World Bank, possibly the IMF, this is an important sort of stepping stone for the BRICS nations coming into their own in the international arena, and specifically the realm of global governance. Now, the question is whether or not these become alternatives or simply reforms to the system of global governance already being evolved. For example, a lot of the reforms they're talking about, new global reserve currency, these have been in the plans of Western elites and institutions for decades. Even Timothy Geithner, the U.S. Treasury Secretary in 2009, said that they're open to the idea of a global reserve currency, but that this process has to be evolutionary. Now, the IMF has its special drawing rights, SDRs, which are being set up to be a global reserve currency. The G20 decided that in 2009. And of course, the BRICS nations are already members of the Bank for International Settlements, which is the highest institution of global governance in the world today. It's sort of the central bank to the world's central bankers. So if a new currency system comes up, it's likely to be through the BIS, which is itself essentially a Western-dominated institution. So whether or not they create an alternative or simply create reforms to what exists, that I think is the real question.
Now, they are expected to sign an agreement allowing their individual banks to extend credit to other members using their own currency. So would you say that this is a step toward replacing the dollar?
An evolutionary step, yes. I mean, China and Russia already have agreements to exchange in their own currencies. China and Japan even are creating these type of exchange scenarios. So it's decreasing the role of the U.S. dollar in foreign reserves, in exchange reserves, so that these countries will be less dependent upon the U.S. dollar itself to trade in various goods and currencies. And that's symbolic of the decline of the U.S. dollar in global markets. It's sort of a type of rebalancing of the poles of power in the world. But the currency system itself is what is in need of total overhaul. I mean, the fact that they're simply reducing the role of the U.S. dollar does not exactly solve the problems of the global fractional reserve central banking system.
Another big announcement that they are expected to make is that all these countries are planning to form this joint development bank. How do you think that this bank could rival the World Bank?
Well, it would give better terms and fairer conditions to those who use the bank, specifically these countries. It would be beneficial to them in their own economic interests. It would be incredibly attractive to so-called third world nations because it would likely lend on better terms than the World Bank ever has. And so I think ultimately this type of bank, the West will probably try to undermine this scenario. It doesn't exactly fit in with their plans for the world. So I think you'll try and see some reforms. You'll see some attempts at reforms within institutions like the World Bank and IMF, which have already begun to a small degree, such as giving more seats to China and India on the IMF. But they'll try and bring the BRIC nations more firmly within the framework of global institutions that already exist. But creating a sort of development bank for the BRICS nations themselves, that would be a type of alternative which could potentially be very beneficial to them.
Now, a criticism that this group often gets is the fact that they're so different. They're on different continents, very different economies, different governments. Critics say that BRICS, it's nothing more than an acronym, but do you think that these countries will be able to find enough common ground?
Well, of course, they have enough common mutual interests. I mean, the idea that China, because it's totalitarian, and Brazil, because it's democratic, can't find common ground. Well, China and the United States are heavily interdependent and have been for several decades. The United States trades with totalitarian governments all over the world. There's no reason why Brazil can't do the same or India can't do the same. It's sort of just another type of rhetorical ploy in the media, I think, to just undermine the efforts at potential alternatives.
And speaking of the media, Andrew, want to ask you, this is a huge summit, huge implications for the world economy, but there's not much talk about it in the mainstream media. Why not?
Well, the mainstream media isn't there to talk about information and issues that exist and are important and people should know about. The mainstream media is there to entertain, to misinform and miseducate, and to essentially distract people. So the way that they frame the issues, that's what you're supposed to be focused on. Other major developments in the world, just don't pay attention to them. Because then people won't exactly know what's going on, and it's easier to control a population if they don't know the actual situation and issues in the world.
All right.
So the Western media has no interest in educating the public.
And we are going to talk more about that throughout the show. Andrew, thank you for weighing in. That was Andrew Gavin Marshall, project manager at the peoplesbookproject.com.